We have a real treat this morning as 4 members and friends of Live Oak, each in a different stage of life, will reflect on Mary Oliver's poem, The Summer Day. Reverend Jonathan will be back in the pulpit next week for the ever popular Chat with the Minister service with Al Ranez. You really don't want to miss that. You don't know what kind of scandals might arise. Let's pause now as we move into our time of worship. In Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world, the symbol of the lighted flame in a chalice unites members in worship and symbolizes our faith in action. It represents the warmth of community. It represents the flame of hope. The flaming chalice, like our faith, stands open to receive new truths that pass the tests of reason, justice, and compassion. If you're joining us on Zoom and you have your own chalice, please light your chalice now and join me in lighting this flame that represents our connection to one another. Please join me in reading these words by Sarah Skovland, adopted by Melanie Jacobson. We light our chalice, flame of connection and continuity, remembering those who came before us, anticipating those yet to come, appreciating those in our lives now. May we cherish the stories we hear today, listening with open hearts and minds to the myriad ways we lead our wild and precious lives.
We celebrate the young and the old among us. There is a timelessness to life's milestones. When we contemplate the arc of our lives, inhabiting both memory and hope, we suspend ourselves in a kind of agelessness. Let us listen to each other's stories, each one in response to Mary Oliver's question. Pray, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And may we sculpt our own dreams, remaining open to the wonder of all that is uniquely wild and precious within us, now and forever.
Hello, my name is Erica Contreras. I'm representing the ages of 5 to 25. So, yeah, I am physically closer to 25. Sometimes I feel closer to 5, though. We ask kids a lot about what they want to be when they grow up. And usually we expect to hear the usual things like doctor, astronaut, Spider-Man, the 3 most common jobs. If you'd asked me, I would have said marine biologist, psychological researcher, or neurologist, but I was a highly specific child. Even highly specific children are usually wrong about what their future job will be. So why bother asking in the first place? I think the reason is because the question we want to ask is, who do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be someone who helps others? Someone who makes new discoveries? Spider-Man? And thank you. I think that these answers are more meaningful. For one, most of us don't define ourselves by our jobs once you reach adulthood, but also I think that these answers are usually more consistent. I didn't have the words to describe it when I was 3 years old and confidently decided I was going to be a marine biologist because dolphins are my favorite animal. And yes, I knew what a marine biologist was when I was 3 years old. But I wanted to be someone who asked questions. I wanted to seek knowledge and serve human need. And only now, as I'm writing this, am I realizing that I am a poster child for Unitarian Universalism. Anyways, Mary Oliver asked me what I will do with my one wild and precious life. Okay, Melanie asked me, but she was asking on behalf of Mary Oliver. I can't give a concrete answer, having not even finished my education yet, but I do know that I want to ask big questions and search for the answers. I want to be the kind of person who lets my natural curiosity and creativity drive whatever it is I do. That's not to say I won't do other things. I think I've got a pretty good handle on the wild parts of life. I play in the rain, and I do cartwheels whenever the mood strikes, and I give my friends strange fashion advice. Most of my friends and family say I'm the silliest person they know, which is a very kind way of saying weirdest. And I intend to keep pursuing that instinct for play. It is one of the great joys of my life to make people smile and laugh. And that's where the precious comes in. I love it when I can bring a friend out of a bad day with a good story. Sometimes my sister and I just need to share a single look to burst into uncontrollable laughter. And if you're wondering how being curious and creative fits into all of this, have you ever tried to come up with your own jokes? And not the kind Reverend Jonathan tells, like actually good jokes? Sorry, I didn't. Real quick, so I used to work somewhere where my coworkers would tell knock-knock jokes all the time, but they would never finish them. They'd go knock-knock, and you'd go, who's there? And then the door would open, and the homeowner would go, sorry, I don't want any cookies. Thank you. I have a little message here that says, apologize if necessary. So I don't know exactly what I will do with my one wild and precious life. But I know I will keep finding ways to ask questions, and I will keep looking for answers in unexpected places. I will keep being silly, no matter how many tomatoes are thrown at me. I will spread joy and have fun, and most importantly, I will try to be the best version of myself. Because in the words of Spider-Man, the suit doesn't make you a hero, the choices you make do.
Oops. Jessie Turner, the next age group, 26 to 45, although I do have a 5 and almost 3/4-year-old with me as well. Okay. My mother moved me across the country 4 times before I turned 13. Such early nomadic ways made me adaptable and curious, but reflected deeper turmoil. She took me from my father as a baby and kept me from him for years. The man I knew as my dad died when I was 5, later replaced by an abusive stepfather. After college, I finally chose my own moves, first to the El Paso Juarez border, then to Oakland. At 30, I earned my PhD in Chicanic Studies, the first from UCSB and second in the nation by barely a month, was I only number 2, and moved to Florida for my first professorship. I gave myself 15 years to achieve my dream of finally settling down with a career, family, home, and community. I turned 45 2 weeks from today, so I was already poised to reflect on what I will do with my one wild and precious life. Teaching gender and ethnic studies and writing creative nonfiction was truly my vocation. But to return to California, I forced myself to produce traditional research I neither cared for nor excelled at. 7 years ago, I left academia for Goleta, moving into the house my partner has lived in since 1995. This is the longest I've stayed in one city, let alone one house. I've held the same job for 6 years, formed my longest in-person friendships 5 years ago, and taken a weekly fused glass class for 3 years. Each is a personal record, and you might believe my wandering self has finally grown roots. But I know better. The The house is not mine, and I feel ambivalent at best about my job. My local friends' less radical worldviews stifle my truest self, and my glass practice is limited to only a few hours each week. I joined the UU tradition for its commitment to justice, equity, diversity, values I started fighting for at 15 against my stepfather. Gender and ethnic studies in college allowed me to analyze that trauma within broader systems of oppression. Because no one had saved me when I most needed it, I tried to save others by staffing shelters on the border and organizing San Francisco families living in hotels. Discovering critical mixed-race studies in graduate school allowed me to trace the histories of Abenaki and Mexican erasure from both sides of my family. As a professor, I equip students to name and navigate their own worlds, knowing personally how education can save a life. Most recently, 12,000 UC workers ratified our first labor contract for a union that I started 3.5 years ago. I will always live out such commitments, but at 45, what I optimistically interpret as my life's literal midpoint, I must make a new commitment, to myself this time. The childhood traumas I suffered taught me early and repeatedly to devalue myself. Motherhood has exposed layers of unhealed trauma that I didn't even know I carried. After 20 years of on and off therapy, a recent complex PTSD diagnosis finally gifted me true self-understanding in the beginning of self-compassion. Starting now, my resolutions for this new year of my life are to accept my flaws, speak without regret, trust my intuition, and hold my boundaries. As simple as these may be for some, every single one defies how trauma trained me to survive. When I first wrote the word resolutions, it actually came out as revolutions. Learning to accept and love myself as my road to peace and joy is as revolutionary as anything I've done for others. Perhaps it is more so, for while I always knew that you were worth fighting for, that indigo is worth fighting for, I'm just now learning that I am too. They say that 50 is the new 45. Still far from the settled life I envisioned, I think of the saguaro from my earliest Arizona memories. Shaped by desert extremes, it grows at its own unhurried pace to gain that endless sky while casting a deep taproot to gather water. When ready, it creates a sanctuary for other life within its ribs. My rebirth will be a daily practice of that same courage and patience. I don't know what the next 45 years of my one wild and precious life will bring, but I hold hope for the blessings and adventures I cannot yet even imagine.
My Jim showed me that cartoon and I just related to it. 20 years ago, our minister asked me to answer Oliver's question in a service like this. I was 40 with a 6-month-old and a 4-year-old and a gaggle of high school history students. My initial response to the poem then was a little snarky, but my answer was crystal clear. I would carry on changing diapers, grading essays, and yearning for afternoon naps. 2 decades later, I traded in teaching for the administrator role here and a full nest for an empty one. At 60, I'm still finding my way, and I have a less certain answer to her question. I don't question that it is good to lie down in the grass face to face with another terrestrial of some sort, just to be. But I'm finding that as I taper down the productive stage of my life, not knowing how to define my wild, precious existence is simultaneously liberating and anxiety-producing. Being an animal of a self-doubting sort, I mistake her meaning for a pointless substitute. Does my existence measure up? But measuring up is missing the point. It's not about bucket lists and scout badges. I feel no compulsion to make every second count or to leave behind something profound to remember me by. It's not that I don't have drive or aspiration. I just know that the value of my life isn't predicated on what I've produced or whether I'll be remembered. I know that my bursts of creativity and epiphanies are as much dependent on rest and empty spaces in my life as they are on my life's adventures. At the moment, my idea of a wild and precious life is daydreaming in a hammock, feeling the sun and breeze on my skin, or spending a day reading a book in my pajamas. It's a walk hand in hand with Jim in the evening stillness. It's accidental encounters with beauty in nature. It's the abiding love of this congregation and time spent in conversation with friends and family. I'm not in a hurry to be done with work, but I am finding myself enjoying losing track of time, not doing my job. If I'm honest, how I spend my time has a lot to do with the privileged existence into which I was born. I've worked hard and meaningfully, but my comfort also rests on the efforts and generosity of my parents and grandparents. I might have a different interpretation of the summer day if I had so little income that I had to work 3 jobs, come home to an empty pantry, or if Earth or armed forces unleashed their fury on my home. But then I remember watching a documentary with Jim about the white helmets, Syrian civilian volunteers who rescued people from the rubble of war, grisly work with a lot of risk and little reward. They suffered losses, yet helped others. They found flickers of beauty, laughter, and affection that kept them whole in spite of the avalanche of violence and unpredictability. So Oliver's invitation to notice, to pay attention, has little to do with security and more to do with a state of being, of remaining open to fleeting joys, a pause in the drone of life's accounting. I drove to rehearsal the other evening, a bit grumpy at having to shuffle down one of Jim's delicious dinners in order to get there on time. I lamented that my voice isn't what it used to be. Then, as I descended the ramp onto the 101, I saw her rise above the silhouetted ridge of the mountains, a supermoon, creamy white, luminous. She distracted me from self-pity and spoke to me about waxing and waning. She reminded me that her face will transform nightly. Such is the nature of our lives. Change is its arc from beginning to end. Something that had seemed essential to my well-being morphs into something else, no less or more meaningful, but worthwhile if I choose to see it that way. If I remain open, if I'm prepared to be surprised by what captures my attention and connect with it. Prepared to be surprised. a paradox Mary Oliver understood, and a worthy refrain for whatever comes next.
This is a terrible assignment. First, because the organizers suggested I keep my remarks down to 3 to 5 minutes. And those of you who know me well know that I have never done anything in 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not likely to start today. And the second point is that at my stage of life, I mean, you'll notice that I'm number 4, which could duplicate or indicate ancient. I prefer, chronologically gifted, but it seems to me that this is an assignment that invites me to create some sort of a retroactive bucket list. What have I done? How did it go? Were there any wondrous surprises? Mary Oliver's poem is essentially an invitation to get out of our heads and into the flowers. And her reference to death is an admonition not to get there too soon, certainly not before you've had a chance to smell some gardenias. I never had a bucket list, but I have thought about what it would look like if I did. Well, yes, I wanted to go to college. College required money. I didn't have any. So I went into business for myself. I had some skills with a hammer, so therefore it became Pete's Home Repair and Maintenance. And I earned $2.50 an hour. I made a very good living. And I got a couple of degrees. At some level, I knew I wanted a family. I wanted kids and grandkids. That felt like so much fun. And I think, in retrospect, I won a massive brass ring on all fronts. I feel extraordinarily lucky. I married my 3rd grade sweetie, and we had 2 kids of our own, and then that didn't work so well, so I married someone else, and she had 2 kids, and so I had 4 kids, and that's even better. And life goes on. I think I had wanted to be a college professor for most of my life and be invited to talk about stuff and how it really works. For over 40 years, I had the privilege of watching students in classes and talking to them and watching carefully as they searched for that little inner switch that turned on the lights and caused them in class to say, "Oh, I got it." And anyone in this room who has ever been a classroom teacher will know exactly what I'm talking about. And this was especially true when I started study abroad programs in China and Vietnam and the Soviet Union, where students were in class 24/7 because the environment spoke to them. Now, others may do it differently, but that's how I rolled around in the grasses and smelled gardenias. At 37, I met Bets Winnicky and formed a most wondrous and loving partnership. She was later to become your founding minister. It was on our 2nd date that we decided to grow old together. And we worked to make that happen for the next 41 years. Together, we made the conscious decision to work together on some project of consequence. and that was live oak. Now, I had always wanted to go to China. I remember as a kid, as a 5-year-old kid, digging a hole in the front yard of the farm where I lived. It was a foot deep. Well, a foot is a long distance for a 5-year-old, yeah? But the rumor was that it was likely to be another foot or 2. And so I surrendered that immediate travel possibility, but never the dream. And when I became a faculty member at Santa Barbara City College and had created a study abroad program, I found a way of bringing students to China again and again for 3-month periods. So I learned a lot about China. I didn't learn enough to become an expert. I had a conversation with the publisher of Hong Kong Press many, many years ago, and he said, there are no experts on China, only people with varying degrees of ignorance. I was one of those. I wanted to do the same in Vietnam because I had been there in uniform during the Vietnam conflict. So I visited Hanoi University and found that the people who were interviewing me had also been in the war. It was the same war on a different side. But I was invited to give a lecture on American foreign policy at Hanoi University. And that was an experience that can never be replicated. Those graduate students were truly sharp, and I was subjected to an inquisition that in retrospect, was fun. But I guess also, I should say I'm an immigrant. Now, immigrants can be a little strange. They rarely take the benefits of being an American for granted. We just don't. There's an ongoing need to pay back the benefits of acquired citizenship, so I have made it a very deliberate process to take part in causes and nonprofit organizations that help to make life a little better for people, sometimes even succeeding. But it's an effort premised on the notion that democracy is a participatory activity. It's also messy and clumsy. Autocracy is so much easier. All you have to do is obey rules. Now, Mary Oliver reminds us that sometimes we get caught in that rat race of mindless and compulsory activity, stuff that simply has to be done. And I've discovered that much of this is a trap imposed by clumsy thinking. It begins usually with a sentence, "This must be done," and that's the clue. That's when I get out of my chair and try to abandon my computer. I don't have a grassy field in which to fall down because, for me, getting back up would be a problem. And I don't have grasshoppers that land in the palm of my hand. But I do have a garden, caringly tended by Karen, who has a green thumb, and I don't. It's magical. Stuff blooms in living color if I manage to stop long enough to appreciate it. And I have a workshop with tools and lumber and screws and nuts and bolts and a few paintbrushes and a never-ending list of projects that always seems to invite me to be creative. That's my therapy. So to paraphrase an old movie, I've had a wonderful life. Not eager to shuffle off to some celestial buffalo, but when that happens, I'll have no regrets. And in responding to Mary Oliver's core question, have I had a plan for all of this? I'd have to say, not really. And somewhere in all of this is a secret to being fully alive. Sometime around D-Day, General Dwight Eisenhower said, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." A reliance on plans is a reliance on predictability. We may make plans today expecting tomorrow to be just like it, and then we find out that it isn't. Big surprise. And then we have to make a new plan, right? So here's the question. Do we have the capacity as human beings to switch, to move out of the plan that we had planned yesterday or the day before? Or does our search for a kind of a risk-free life keep us wedded to a thought that we had previously? Perhaps that's what the Roman poet Horace meant in 23 BC when he memorialized the term carpe diem. You thought it was Robin Williams, right? Now, carpe diem can be severely criticized as being a substitute for reckless living and irresponsibility. But I haven't found it to be so. As I search for a revised approach to a changed set of circumstances, the requirement for a new plan, I've usually found a grasshopper preparing to fly.